So, lads, today we got to talk about this, and we're going to talk a little bit about Natasha Cloud, who, if we're being real here, has kind of become, I'm not going to say, she's become the face of the burn it down movement, as in she has come out and said that she doesn't care about the WNBA and being a league or not because she can just play in Unrivaled. And yesterday, she basically made what I believe is a crazy statement to make. I understand the kind of sentiment around it. Basically being like, look, if you're getting rid of housing, there's a disadvantage to living in a big market. And I mean, yeah, that's kind of the way everything is. Like, she doesn't have to stay in New York. And by the way, I don't think New York really want her either. Like, she's talking about playing in New York, but like the Liberty GM, as good as said, he does not want her as a starter. Like, well, let's take a listen to what Tash Cloud has said. And Tash Cloud has said some really crazy shit. She has said some really crazy shit, to be honest, when it comes to the CBA. And, like, her as a mouthpiece for anything is not ideal, because even if the point she's making has some validity, she will say the most crazy out-of-pocket thing that makes her look completely out of touch to reality. So let's take a listen to this here.
Are still not making enough, that middleman potentially still not making enough for housing to also be taken off of the table. You all know this New York market.
But we're talking about housing being taken off the table. As far as I'm aware, it's being phased out. And it's being phased out for certain types of players. So, like, for people saying, oh, you know, the middleman housing's not going to be, like, housing's being phased out. But I'm like, if you, for example, are a player that, let's just say you're in New York, and it might make more sense to take a minimum contract. Like New York, ironically, because minimum contract players are going to get their housing paid for. As far as I'm aware in the CBA, minimum contract players are going to have their housing paid. So if you want to take you can probably take a minimum contract to stay in New York because of the way the housing is. But like, that's the same in every single league in the world. Like, the salaries pro players make if you're playing in Paris some of the times is a little bit lower than in the same league in a cheap one, especially when it comes to the lower level pro leagues in Europe. The salaries for pro players that they make in Dublin is lower than the salaries that they might make in Kerry, because rent costs 200 a month in Kerry, it costs $1,000 a month in Dublin. And that's just for a room. And that's just for a random room in a place. It might cost $1,000 a month. If you're booking your own apartments, it's $2,000, $3,000 a month in Dublin. So for teams in Dublin to get players their own apartments, you're paying $2,000-3,000 a month. And it's like, well, instead of $300 a month, another place, $300-400 a month. So let's keep going.
That $200,000 jump that players are going to make, that's before taxes, that's before what they would have to pay for a potential housing market in the state of New York. So I still am focused on our middleman. Again, I think it's a starting point. I'm happy with them finally coming back to us with a proposal, but I think there's a lot more that we can.
Like, citing that being in New York will cancel out a $200,000 jump. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, there is no scenario where you can make $200,000 extra, and that does not make it. But there's no scenario where you can make $200,000 extra, and you're not in a better scenario. Like, I'm sorry. People are like, oh, what about New York tax and everything? I'm like, yeah, $200,000. Okay, it's only 6 months. They're only 6 months a year. So $200,000, whatever way they're taxed in 6 months a year. So that, obviously, sorry, that money's there taxed 6 months a year. Let's just say, for argument's sake, let's just say 50%. Let's just say they're taxed 50% on that. They are making $100K from that, just purely that salary. That's not including any endorsements. That's not including anything else. And that's not including the rev share that they get at the end of that. So obviously all of that is taxed. But let's just say, just for argument's sake, salary, they are making $200K on top of what they're making. So it's a $200K boost. So if you're realistic, if you're a $100K player, you're probably going to be on $300K. If you were a $200K player, you're going to be on maybe $400 to $600K. So let's just say, for argument's sake, everybody goes up $200K. The median salary is still going to be maybe $330, $340K. And if you are on one of these minimum salaries, you're getting houses paid for you. So if you're a mid-tier player and you're making $400K a year, after tax, that's $200K. You're in New York for 6 months. I've looked through a whole bunch of things. You can get some unbelievably nice apartments for $4,000 to $5,000 a month. Some really nice apartments for that much. And the thing is that let's be completely real. Let's be completely real. Teams are going to find ways of cooking the books and get you cheap accommodation. Oh yeah, teams can't put you up, which is I'm not gonna say isn't right. I think teams should be allowed to put players up if it's their choice. I think it should be a choice. I don't think it should be mandatory, but I think teams should be allowed to do it if they want to. I think in general, that's one of those things that kind of annoys me about American leagues, that every team has to revert to what the cheapest owner wants to do. And it's not a case, like what I think it should be is that any team should be allowed to put players up if they want to. But let's just say, who knows? Surely Joe Tsai has a friend that's willing to, rent out apartment to a players for a little bit under market value. And nothing going through Tsai. Let's be real. That's probably happening. But even still, let's just say it's $5,000 a month for 6 months. That's $30,000. Pre-tax, that's $60,000 extra. She basically just said, even getting a pretty much luxury apartment, and I understand, obviously, it's different if it's someone with kids and they have to get like a full apartment and do a bunch of other things, but I have multiple people. But I'm like, at the end of the day, like the teams didn't cover. I don't think the teams gave everyone apartments for all of that either. Or sorry, team gave people full size houses. And you also don't have to play in New York. Like it's the same in the NBA. It's like saying in the NBA that it's actually players should be allowed be paid more in New York than in Texas because there's no state income tax in Texas, and it costs more to live in New York. And I'm like, well, yeah, it kind of does, but at the end of the day, that's just sports leagues. That's the case with all sports leagues. Like if Tash Cloud is saying that it's not enough, fair enough. Like you can absolutely have that opinion, and at least it's not an exact quote. But like, I'm sorry, but at the same time, for an average, you're not getting a sympathy from the average person by saying, after tax and rent and everything, I'm only pocketing $200,000 a year. The mid-tier player is only going to be pocketing $200,000 a year in New York, whereas if they were in Texas, and by the way, like if you're in Texas, okay, you're saving what, $2,000 a month? Like it's about 12. I would say to get a half decent apartment, the difference is it's probably $2,000 a month more expensive in New York than some of these other places. But I'm like, you can absolutely argue that that's not a good thing. We don't have to play in New York. The rookies get their contract. The rookies who don't have a choice about playing in New York get their contracts given. And if you don't want to you can take a minimum contract. If you want your housing paid for the entirety of your contract, you can take a minimum. Like it might make sense in New York taking a minimum contract depending on what type of housing they give you. It might make sense in New York to take a minimum over taking a $300,000 slightly above minimum. It might make sense to take the minimum. But like, there's no scenario where if you're making a $400,000 or $500,000, which Tash Cloud is in that range, that she's not going to make more money than she's ever made before, even including when you take away housing, because there's no fucking way Tash is making that in Unrivaled. And yeah, like I understand some of the concerns, but like to imply that a $200,000 boost doesn't offset not getting housing is crazy, even in New York. And also when the fact is that housing is being phased out, but it's not being phased out for all players. Like by the time housing is phased out for all players, the minimum contract is realistically going to be in and around $350,000. And at $350,000, even after tax, you're still pocketing $100,000 a year. Even after all your expenses, even after housing, you're still able to save $100,000 a year. So you're not going to get any sympathy from the regular person in that regard. You're just not. That's one of the things that, like, a lot of this coming, and a lot of regular people are like completely out of touch. And I understand kind of where there's a little bit of like, oh shit, like we're kind of in a bad way here. But at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, the most important thing with all of this is that the league happens, because again, the league doesn't happen These players make no money. And there's also, you can't forget, there's the rev split coming in as well. The rev split money that players are going to get. So at the end of the day, like, Tash Cloud is going to be one of those players that benefits from Caitlin Clark. Like, the fact is that every bit of merchandise that Caitlin Clark, in the CBA, basically, team merchandise is split between all teams. So everyone's like, oh yeah, the Sky are really going to want to keep, they're not going to get rid of Angel Reese because how much merch she sells. But I'm like, the Sky don't make the money. That gets split. That gets split amongst all these teams. As far as we're aware, every Caitlin Clark jersey is split evenly amongst every single team. So the Fever don't even make that money back. So like, these individual players are less of a like need to have for a specific team than anything else. They're a lot less than you would think. So anyway, yeah, that's the video. See you guys.